So our final speaker, who will close these 2 beautiful days of presentations, is one of the leading Buddhist teachers in America, the great storyteller, Jack Kornfield. Jack trained as a Buddhist monk in Thailand, Burma, and India, and has taught meditation worldwide since the mid-1970s. In 1975, he co-founded the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts, and in 1987, Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Woodacre, California, where the memorial for Christina Grof was recently held. His publications include A Path with Heart, a guide through the perils and promises of spiritual life, and After the Ecstasy, The Laundry, how the heart grows wise on the spiritual path, among many other publications. Please help me in welcoming our closing speaker, Jack Kornfield.
Thank you all, and I'm so moved by what Will presented. That's still really resonating in me. And I'm not used to speaking briefly, so I'll do my best. There's a certain way in which there's like a force field around Stan, and it's kind of interesting. This isn't in my notes at all. It's like some center of gravity or something when you think cosmologically. When a comet flies by a really big or heavy star or something, it changes the course of the comet or the planets. There's something about Stan, and it's not egoic, which is part of what makes it so brilliant, because he's actually not into power. Otherwise, everybody would be wearing Hawaii shirts or something like that. You would know that. But he's not. He's actually into curiosity and discovery and love and intelligence. But there's something so deep about his love of truth and about the vision that he carries that for me personally, and many who spoke and many who are in this room, just going near Stan changes your life. And it's changed because he's a visionary, and because somewhere inside, underneath, I heard, I may be wrong, that his resting pulse was around 30, you know. And I've watched him in the middle of insane people going through breath work and doing incredibly insane things, and Stan is just totally calm, like you described in the plane flight, you know. Oh yeah, that's interesting. What else do you have to show me? You know, but there's something so big and so connected to the universe and so loving at the same time, so that's really trustworthy. It's not about power, it's about interest and curiosity. He's one of the most interested human beings I've ever met, that changed my life and the lives of people in the room in enormous ways, and then spread out, as Will and various other people said, to change the world. And I believe that Stan's work is only 10% realized, that the underlying vision of a transformation, and you know, in a certain way, when Ralph was speaking, and it was really beautiful, he talked about somebody mapping these terrain that everybody was swimming in, trying to figure out, well, what's the map? How do you get in? How do you get out? The map of going back through birth, not as an idea, but as an experience that I've had and seen so much, into transpersonal dimensions, into all these capacities of being other beings in the archetypal world, and the capacity of consciousness itself. And then what this means for modern physics, for healing, for ecology, all the meanings that Stan has written about. We're just beginning. We're just in the beginning, and it's really what happens when you're with a visionary. But it's a visionary as well. I mean, Stan is a visionary. That, again, these other people, speakers have spoke to, that weds the vastness with the intimate. When James Baldwin wrote, I imagine one of the reasons that people cling to their hate and prejudice so stubbornly is they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. and part of Stan and Ralph and people's work about transforming the way human beings relate, whether it's war or conflict between gender and so forth. It's just one of the seeds that's there at the heart of the vision of Stan's understanding. And for me to meet you, Stan, which was more than 40 years ago, I'd come back from being in the Buddhist monastery, and a couple of little images. Yes, I also was in Haight-Ashbury, and yes, I did dip my little cup in, at the Fillmore and have my experiences back in the Summer of Love and before. And then I went into Buddhist monasteries to try to figure out what was happening to me from those experiences. And I had my out-of-the-body experiences and dissolving into light and rapture and samadhi things. And then I read a text that described the teachings of the Yogacara mind-only school of Buddhism, where 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, a teacher had gone to the Chinese emperor and said that the microcosm and the macrocosm are all united, and they are like the slide that Stan will probably go back to about the hologram, that they're enfolded in one. It's all the nature of consciousness. And the emperor said, I don't get it. Now, the proper response would have been, let's do some holotropic breath work. But since that hadn't been developed in quite that way at the time, although there were monasteries that I was in that had some precursors to it in beautiful ways, the master went and had constructed an 8-sided pagoda or stupa. Inside were perfectly placed mirrors, so that when you walked in, the mirrors reflected one another. And in the center, he hung a candle, and he brought the emperor in, and he said, here, now you can see how the small is reflected, one is reflected in the many, because you could see thousands of candles in all the directions of those mirrors. And the emperor said, I see. And he said, no, your majesty, wait. And then he took underneath the candle, and he hooked a small crystal. And he said, now look in a facet of the crystal. And in the facet of the crystal, he could see reflected all of those candles. And he said, this shows you how the vast is contained in the smallest thing, and the smallest thing contains the vast. And says, this is only an approximation, your majesty. Well, Stan not only has this experience, but somehow I think part of the brilliance of our collective gathering and the work is that he's been able to give voice to it and articulate it, to integrate it in this broad range of fields, and then to create methodology, partly because he was desperate because we weren't allowed to take those substances legally, so we had to find some other way, to create methodology that would allow for the transformation of consciousness that we're on the verge of, we hope. And it's so clear to everybody that no amount of technology, and here we are near Silicon Valley, nanotechnology, biotechnology, incredible scientific development, stem cell, all that, none of that is going to stop continuing warfare. None of it's going to stop racism. None of it's going to stop environmental destruction and all of the things that we're worried about. Those outer developments have to now be met by a change of human consciousness, which is Stan's game, basically. Not only does he see it and embody it and carry it, but then he says, here, let me articulate it in politics, let me articulate it in art, let me articulate it in all these various domains. So when I came back from the monastery, I was looking for kindred spirits, and I met David McClellan, who was the chairman of the department at Harvard, who hired Tim and Ram Dass, and Ralph was there, and Dan Goleman, and various other people. And then I started to work at an East Coast Esalen, and I thought, who do I most want to meet? Who do I think might actually understand the weird stuff that happened to me in these years of retreats in the monasteries? Oh, I've been reading Stan Grof. So I went down to Spring Grove, met Lockwood Rush, who was doing video stuff down there. And then I invited Stan to come, Stan and Joan, his wife at the time, I talked to them and invited them to come and do some teaching in Boston. I also invited John Lilly, and I invited all the people I wanted to meet to come and work in this place. And I met Stan. He was wearing the same shirt. Anyway, but... And immediately, not only did I feel that I was understood, that there was nothing that I'd experienced that didn't fit in this vast map with a good heart, but also the creativity behind it. He said, all right, well, let's dance together. Let's do Buddhism in the mind. Let's do stuff at Esalen. Let's do stuff around the world. And I like that kind of creativity. So I said, sure. And we did. And we were off and running for 40 years, doing all kinds of trainings and things in many, many parts of the world. Underneath it is a kind of willingness on Stan's part to hold the mystery of life and incarnation. And here we go around and we take the bus or we drive, on the right side of the road, and we go to the market and we do the things, as Ram Dass says, you have to remember your Buddha nature and your social security number, something like that. We do the things that are very human and very pragmatic and immediate, but at the same time, that's not who we are. And in these years of working together, I've watched Stan on the floor and holotropic breathwork, and there's somebody going through a demonic experience and possession and trying to, reach out and kill anything they can. And even the facilitators, who are brilliant, are like backing away a little bit. Okay, demonic possession, multiple personality. Okay, let's call Stan, right? And Stan comes over, and his approach, it's the most beautiful thing. What do you think his approach would be? His approach is to become curious. Oh, you're a demon, Tell me about that. Where were you born? Where do you come from? What's your nature? Do you think that's really who you are? And all of a sudden, the demon's eyes kind of go a little like crooked. Well, who am I really? And Stan has somehow taken this demonic consciousness and started to open it to vastness. He has a profound trust in process and in the process of life itself, and it oozes out of him and it changes everybody around him in these remarkable ways. And the team of facilitators he's trained are among the best in the world, and I would trust people to go through anything, birth, death, and every experience in between with the people that he and Christina have trained, because of the kind of courage and vastness that they bring to it. He has a vision that revolutionizes all these different fields in the most remarkable way. The vast cosmology, and I find the cosmic game actually to be in some way the most important of all his books, because it's the one that points really to the essence that what we are and what the world is consciousness. And it's not created out of matter or your brain or anything, but it really, and then it solves or describes all the questions of good and evil or the nature of duality and so forth, not just from his experience, although quite honestly, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this. When you read and he says, someone had a session or I recorded this or something like that, half the time it's Stan, right? But there's a kind of modesty about it where he doesn't want to say, it was actually I had the experience of becoming petroleum, so I'll write about it in the third person. People don't know how weird he really is. Only you do, that's why you're here. Okay. He has one of the most open-minded consciousness of anybody that I ever met, and erudite and educated in that European way of 10 languages and physics and chemistry and mathematics and theater and Sanskrit and Greek philosophy and all those things, which allows him that open-mindedness and an extraordinary education to play and collaborate with almost anybody. And whoever comes into his field, it's like, oh, how can we dance? How can we collaborate? Let's make something interesting. That's an extraordinary thing. And it is, as Will was pointing to and others, and Ralph, it's an invitation to creativity for all those who are around him, his enormous creativity. And in some way, he's sort of like those Tibetan lamas. I don't know what he was, actually. It's really hard. Some kind of guru lama. What was he in the past lives? He doesn't even know that. He's smiling right now. But something, he had some really wild training back there in those other lifetimes. Is all I can say, And then there's these things called terma in Tibet, where you actually reveal things that are ancient and eternal, and you're able to see them, and you say, "Can't you see this?" to everybody else around, and they go, "Huh?" And you say, "Okay, try some breathing. Maybe that will help," or whatever it happens to be. I know I have to finish. Having Stan and Christina, too, in my life for the 40 years as collaborators and dear friends, it transformed my life, as it has many, many people in this room, and inspired and empowered. So I feel tremendously fortunate to have had this friendship and this collaboration. But more than this, I think we're really blessed that this is something very special to be able to both honor Stan, but it's not just honoring Stan, it's honoring his vision and consciousness and the work and the web that it reaches, that's just beginning. I think Stan's seeds are just beginning, and that they're really the kinds of things that can change humanity. So, a little modest, something like that, I'll say, thank you, Stan.